Stephanie Reid, you are the Digital and Travel Media Officer for Tourism Thunder Bay. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Fact Up podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jim.
You know, Thunder Bay, of course, in northwestern Ontario. I visited Thunder Bay several years ago, and when I was telling a few of my friends that I was going to Thunder Bay on purpose, they all looked at me with this very perplexed look on their face. Why did my friends have confused looks on their faces, and should I still be friends with these people?
Well, you should be friends with them, yes, but only so that you can convince them to come to Thunder Bay.
Right.
Yeah, it's far, right? So for a lot of people, they don't really understand why you would spend 16 hours in the car, or what could possibly be there that would be worth that, right?
Right.
And that's a fair point. But we kind of believe it is worth it, and that's it. And for an Ontarian too, there's something to be said about being able to see that much of this province, right? So we live in this province that has this giant backyard, and most of us don't ever explore it, right? Most of us don't go sort of north of Parry Sound, or that's sort of where we all stay down there. And so there's a lot more Ontario, and we're really lucky to have that. And so it is worth it if you can find the time.
You know, they didn't have as many perplexed looks on their faces when I started showing them photos and videos of the sites. You know, we've talked about this before. In the time it takes to drive across Toronto on a good day, you could be in Thunder Bay. It's closer than people think. And I remember, chatting with you about this not too long ago. When you're talking to Canadians who are looking for staycation ideas, what are some of your key selling points when it comes to promoting Thunder Bay? And how has the coronavirus kind of changed those plans?
Yeah, well, so pre-coronavirus, we are one of Canada's sort of premier outdoor cities. So this is where you can have epic outdoor experiences, but also have the amenities of a city. So Thunder Bay is the largest city on Lake Superior. So the largest city on the largest freshwater lake in the world. It has all the amenities one would want in a city, a fantastic culinary scene, a robust and rich art and culture scene. But it's 5 minutes from the thick of the boreal forest. And so you can stay in a 4 or 5 star hotel, and then in 10 minutes be in epic Canadian wilderness, having a stereotypical Canadian experience, right? Like rocks and trees and water and bears, and that's that kind of place. But then there's also a vibrant downtown and great food and music. And so it's really the kind of place where you can have the best of both worlds. And then, like you were saying, I always say to people, my line is always on a typical Friday afternoon, you can be in Thunder Bay faster than you can be in Muskoka. And when you get here, there's wide open spaces. We are the gateway to Northwest Ontario, which just the northwest part of Ontario is 500,000 square kilometers. So in this time where we're trying to stay 2 meters apart, I've got 2 kilometers per person here. So we've got these wide open spaces, and you're not fighting for a campsite, and you're not waiting your turn to go. There's enough outdoor experiences for us all to have that. So then, in how has coronavirus changed that? Certainly those experiences are still there, and they're still maybe even more popular with, us seeking wide open spaces and avoiding congregating groups of people and things like that. But what has happened in the moment is that there are less flights. So there used to be 17 daily flights from Toronto, both from Pearson and Billy Bishop. So in 90 minutes, you could be from, whether you were closer to Pearson or downtown, you could be here. And so that line about getting here from Muskoka worked. And it still does, except there's not quite as many flights. However, traffic is up and flights are up. So Air Canada is adding a second flight every day starting, I believe, next week. And WestJet dropped down to 3 flights a week at the peak of sort of Corona halt. And they're adding 2 more flights a week now. So they'll be up to 5 flights a week. So that connectivity is coming back quickly. So we anticipate that'll be back soon enough. And there's seats for anyone who wants them right now.
So despite having very few flights, it still takes quicker to get to Thunder Bay than it does to get to Muskoka or even across the city, right?
Well, that too, right? And this time, where where all the data, and I'm sure anecdotally you feel the same, where you feel a little safer in your own car right now, or even in a rental car, or in an environment that you can control. And so in a typical summer, maybe Thunder Bay was a little bit far for people, but we don't feel that that's the case this summer, that you're going to feel more comfortable in your car anyway. And so this is the summer to maybe drive a few more hours and have a new experience.
You know, and the first thing that made an impression on me when I landed was, you know, it's so expansive and it's quiet. You know, you've got Willamette Canyon, which is stunning. You got Kakabeka Falls, which is the Niagara Falls of the north. You've got Sleeping Giant Provincial Park, which in my opinion should be a national park. That's just me. So you could find your own piece of heaven no matter what is happening in the world. You're still going to find your oasis. Especially if you have your oasis already within your own vehicle to make the trek, you're going to have an oasis throughout your entire time off, right?
Absolutely right, and you can, and it's the perfect place to create that oasis, to create your own personal protective environment, and to still come to these places and have these epic experiences as they always would have been.
Right. You know, the fur trade, obviously very big, you know, front and center for many years. Fort William Historical Park is a Canadian signature experience. In 1970, you know, the powers that be combined Port Arthur, Fort William. I'm not telling you because you don't know this. I'm just telling people, just generally,
Yeah.
you know, the history of you know, Thunder Bay. 50 years now. It's the golden birthday. Such a rich history, rich Indigenous history, Finnish history. What are some of the events that are still planned? Despite the virus kind of still making its kind of way around and sticking around, what's been planned and what's still being planned?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, unfortunately, a lot of events were canceled or were modified. And this was our 50th anniversary, so we had a whole year of celebrations and gatherings sort of planned. At this point, there are still a lot of virtual events planned. There is a 3-day Canada Day event happening with, you know, live performances and things like that, all happening online. And then we are still planning a sort of end, maybe a culminating type, maybe different wording for that, but it's more of a end of the 50th event, hopefully to do an outdoor event at that time. Earlier in the year, before Corona, we were able to launch the 50th anniversary celebrations. And so the anniversary actually happened on January 1, 1970. So New Year's Eve, they rung 2 bells to simulate the 2 cities to coming together. And on January 1 this year, we were able to launch the anniversary program, as we're sort of calling it. And so we had a big community breakfast, and it was a really fantastic thing. And then we were able to add sort of 50th flair to winter events that happened throughout the sort of winter and springtime. And then, so right now there aren't too many events planned for this next month or so. And we're sort of trying to wait on the province a little bit for maybe some more opening or some more flexibility and things we can do.
Right. Well, at least you were ahead of the ball, right? You were ahead of the game a little bit and kind of, you know, planned it out, and it paid off by the sounds of it. No one could tell what was going to happen this year. But you know, at least you got something in there. At least January 1st, that was huge from what you're telling me. Right?
Yeah, and it was great, and the community really loved it, and it is a really big event for us, right? Being 50 is kind of a weird anniversary for a city in this day and age, right? Like, I was in Montreal for the 400th, and
Right.
you hear these huge numbers, and we're 50. You know,
Right.
like my mom was born in Port Arthur.
Right.
Right. So like people were around for that. And so it's that history isn't that far away for us. And so this was a big deal for people. And so regardless of the fact that we can't have big outdoor concerts and things right now that we normally would have, the community still very much embraced the 50th and is very excited to be having this celebration, you know?
You know, it pays to be so young. You can rectify mistakes made by previous cities, by previous governments, by previous planners, and make it more so of a utopia than what it already kind of potentially is, thanks to nature, right?
Well, right, and that's kind of it, right? So it has changed a lot in the last 50 years. So, but there are still some unique sort of quirky things about it because it was 2 cities. There's things where we have 2 of things, like we have
Right.
2 downtowns,
Right.
which is sort of, most towns don't have that, and we certainly have 2 thriving downtown Port Arthur, downtown Fort William are still very much active, and downtown Port Arthur is now considered the waterfront district, and so it's the entertainment, restaurant, nightclub sort of area. And then downtown Fort William is the south side, and that is government offices, city hall, the courthouse. There's a lot of cool shops and stuff down there as well, but it tends to be more of a business and daytime versus a nighttime sort of thing. But yeah, it's sort of, and then the center part, the intercity area, has over the last 50 years has built up tremendously. So there's all kinds of shopping and a lot of box stores and things like that that connect the two former cities.
Business in the front and party in the back, and in the middle, we all meet together.
Right? That's right.
Well, when the time comes, on a more serious note, how do you promote safety for visitors to Thunder Bay? Like, how do you work with travel-related, organizations to ensure that travelers are safe and will be healthy visiting? And on the flip side, how do you ensure locals that who are hosting visitors remain safe and healthy as well?
Yeah, well, we're working really closely with our municipal government and with our district health unit to make sure that we are up to date on the current guidelines and restrictions and safety measures. And we're constantly trying to communicate that both to visitors and to residents. We are also in constant communication with our hotel partners to, talk about their cleaning procedures and things like that. We have some local companies that are making sanitizer and masks and other PPE. And so we're working on ways to try and connect those businesses with other local businesses and make sure that equipment is available for anyone who wants it and needs it. And so we're just trying to keep the community together and helping each other out as best we can. And that has worked pretty well so far.
Right. That's the biggest issue I find. It's not about, predicting what the travel experience is going to look like and the flight and hotel experience. I think that changes on a day to day. But if I'm packing the car up with snacks and supplies and I want to go on a road trip in time, not right now, but when it's safe to do so for everybody, how do I know I'm going to be safe, and how do I know that I'm going to keep locals safe, and how do they feel about me coming? Maybe they don't want me to come. Maybe we're good with local business, local support, but we don't need your big city problems. Legit.
Yeah,
right?
That's a fair point, right? And I mean, there's certainly, I'm sure I could find you some community members who would agree with that, right? But this is a community that thrives on tourist dollars, and we also see that side, right? So people are trying to be very cautious and take all the precautions possible, and we're trying to find the right balance. And I don't think anyone has found it yet, right? So we're all trying to just work with the community to see what makes us all comfortable and what we're all willing to live with, to go forward. Our market typically is Americans, and we're only about 30 minutes from the US border. And even though we're in Ontario, we are north of Minnesota, so far more Midwestern, hunting, fishing, that type of market. And that the border's closed, and so that's an issue in multiple ways. A lot of the lodges in this area are American owned, or have almost entirely American clientele, and so while we're trying to attract maybe Ontarians later this summer or whatever, a lot of those people don't know what's going to happen to them, and so. I think the whole industry is facing this. I've been talking to my colleagues from different provinces and different cities, and we're all big cities and small cities, and we're all feeling this. No one really knows. No one planned for this, and no one knows when it's going to be over, right? So we're all just trying to make our way through as best we can and keep everyone safe, right? That's our goal, is to keep our visitors safe, to keep our residents safe, and what can we do?
Right. I'm going to nerd out for a sec. Fun fact, okay? Amethyst comes from the Greek word amethystos, which means the opposite of drunk, means sober. And the ancient Greeks, because I know you love this, they wore amethyst and carved drinking vessels from it in the belief that it would prevent intoxication. Talk about those who love amethyst hunting and mining when it comes to Thunder Bay, because it's not just mountains and Superior, but it's also mining, and that's a huge deal in northwestern Ontario, and there's a lot of people who are fascinated with that.
Yeah, well, certainly in northwestern Ontario, mining is huge. So, like, we are mining palladium and gold and minerals all the time, and through providing huge economic impact for the region. But amethyst mining is its whole own thing, and so amethyst is the official gemstone of Ontario, and it is only really found in this particular region of Ontario, and this is one of the largest deposits in the world. And it's super easily accessible. So it's an activity that families enjoy. It's like a very multi-generational activity. But there are people who are like spiritual about amethyst. So we get people who are like into gems and gemstones and the spirit behind it all, and those people are awesome to take mining because like they have this whole philosophy around it all, and so little kids just go and they have fun and everyone likes it. But to go out with those people who take it so seriously is super fun for me, and I really love that. And as an activity, you just go there and you just get it. Like it's just so, it's hard to even describe how plentiful it is. And it's just everywhere. Like you walk on it, you just walk around and it crunches under your shoes and you look down and the ground's just sparkling purple. And it's really hard to describe just how much is there. But anyone can go and you can just go get it. And it's a very super cool experience and it's cheap. And you pay for what you take out. People take out whole buckets, cost them like $20. They walk out with a bucket.
Right.
Like, around here, everyone's got giant stones in their gardens, and people will find it too, right? Like, so there's three active mines open here that visitors can go to and do their own mining and pick their own stones. But for those people that are sort of lucky enough to just sort of be in the region, sometimes you can just find it, right? Like on Crown land, or there's chunks here, they're building a new piece of highway or something, and they got to blow up a piece of rock, and there's a bunch of amethyst pops out, and like it's just sort of everywhere.
That's a bad problem to have.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You know, what struck me when I came up as well was the food and drink scene. Talk to me about the food and drink scene in Thunder Bay, and explain to people what a Persian is.
Well, okay, so first, a Persian is it's sort of like, people might refer to it as a donut, but it's not really a donut. It's sort of more like a cinnamon roll, like a yeasty cinnamon roll, with a thick pink sugary icing, pretty much just a buttercream icing. But it's pink and it's fruit flavored. People will argue with you on whether that is raspberry or strawberry, but it's pink. Right. And it's delicious. And so they were invented in Thunder Bay in the 40s by a man named Art Bennett, and he owned Bennett's Bakery that has since been passed to New Cheese Bakery. And locally, those are sold by the Persian Man. The store is called the Persian Man. Mm-hmm. However, locally, there are also, everyone's got a version of their Persians. So other local bakeries all make Persians, and they're all a little bit different, and locals all have their own sort of favorite, and we'll tell you which one is best.
Right.
And then there are like Persian-inspired things, which is generally cinnamon and strawberry. So there's like Persian-inspired candles and soap and cake and cheesecake and beer. One of our local craft breweries, Dawson Trail, makes a beer called the Imposter, and it's a cinnamon berry beer, which didn't sound appealing to me when I first heard of it, but it is one of the most delicious things I've ever had. It's like a perfect cold summer beer. And so Persian is just a thing everywhere here. There are also, it won a TV Ontario contest as like Ontario's favorite dessert thing. It beat the butter tart, which was like a big
That's huge
point of pride for people in
That's huge.
But there's, people make knockoff ones, so that's also a thing. So people would, like, there was a place in Winnipeg that was making Persians, and someone like went there and like exposed that it wasn't the same, and people take them very serious.
Right.
But so for a long time, that was sort of the food scene that people knew about Thunder Bay: Finnish pancakes and Persians, right?
Right.
But in the last 10 years, the food scene has exploded, maybe even 15 years. So in the late 90s, the farm, there was always a large farm community here. This being in the heart of the Canadian Shield, a lot of people don't think of this as a real great agricultural spot, but it really is. In the Slate River Valley, there is some fantastic fertile farmland, and we have relatively short season, but anything that you can grow in that short season, we grow here a lot. There's also cattle farms and a couple of dairies, and so there's a lot of that. But in the late 90s, a company called Thunder Oak Gouda opened, and they were a local Dutch family, and they started making traditional Dutch cheese, and they were Ontario's first Gouda farm. And they have the cows, they make the milk, they make the cheese. It happens 100% on site. Visitors can take tours, and you can learn all about making cheese, and you can take samples. It's a great place to visit. But that sort of started, Thunder Oak got themselves into a couple of restaurants. And then there was also a restaurant called Caribou Restaurant and another one called Bistro One, both of which are still around. And they sort of started just a different food movement. Thunder Bay was always a sort of Midwestern blue collar town. And so it was a lot of steak and meat and potatoes, which is great things, but there wasn't a lot of variety. And so these two places came in with a little bit more of a modern flair on their menu. And then the farm community built, and it just sort of very organically started to build up. And in the last 10 years, there's now like a restaurant district, and there, probably 40 new restaurants open in the last 10 years. Everyone's still open. Every kind of different cultural food that you can imagine. Some of the best Thai food I've ever had in my life in Thunder Bay. So things that you might not necessarily expect. And then in the last 5 years or so, it's gotten even more, say, modern, cosmopolitan, maybe, more what you would typically find in a larger center. So smaller places, unique menus, super farm to table, all local ingredients, things changing seasonally, daily changes, things like that. A lot of handcrafted ingredients. So we've got restaurants like Tomlin who make their own charcuterie boards where they're doing all their own meats in a separate facility. So like things are going beyond that. There's also companies like Heartbeat Hot Sauce, which they worked at restaurants. One of the owners is a part owner at Tomlin, and so they started making hot sauce like in their free time, and it has now sort of taken over the world. They've been featured on Hot Ones, which is like a super popular YouTube series about hot sauce, and so you can buy their hot sauce in stores all around the world. And so like in just a couple of years, they've taken over. And so we've moved from this like blue collar meat and potatoes kind of regular thing into these like really cool fusion menus, and that is a lot based on Thunder Bay and our connection to our natural environment, right? So there's a lot of these people left Thunder Bay, moved to Southern Ontario to open their cool restaurant in Toronto, or to learn from a chef down there, or cut their teeth down there as they would, and then find themselves in their 30s, wanting to have a family, can't really afford to buy a house down there, find that you can buy a house and a restaurant up here, and your commute is 4 minutes, and you can, and are moving their families back. And right. It's really great to see. And we've also had, Thunder Bay has a college, a university, a medical school, and a law school. And we also have a medical research tissue lab and research facility. And so that has brought in a whole new type of resident. People who like scientists and doctors and people that didn't used to live here. And so they come from these larger centers and they want these things. So now people can see a market where they didn't see it before. And turns out we all wanted that stuff too. And so we all support it as well. And so it just works really, really well. And the community the restaurateurs as well support each other. It's a very cooperative environment. And they have all definitely seen the, rising tide philosophy. And it's worked for all of us.
Changing of the palate, changing of the guard, changing of the attitude. I remember seeing an ad for Thunder Bay in the subway in Toronto about how you could have been home by now and you could have been at work by now. It was a crowded subway. And so I thought, man, this is working. This ad is working for me right now, right? But what is the most rewarding part of your job? And, at the same time, Thunder Bay, traditionally has been known in many people's minds to be a little rough around the edges. What challenges do you have promoting Thunder Bay and the evolution of the city? All that you just told me, what are still some of the challenges you have to convey that message to people that have this preconceived notion of like, oh, I was there, 25 years ago, drove through it. Yep. So at the same time, what's been some of your challenges to promote, but at the same time, what's been the most rewarding part of your job?
Exactly what you just said, right? So the challenge is Canadians Ontarians. And so exactly like you said, most Canadians, most Ontarians at some point in their life have driven through Thunder Bay. So you can't avoid it. Both north and south routes of the Trans-Canada meet in Thunder Bay. You can't drive around it. It's impossible. So if you've ever driven across Canada, you have been here. And so that means 25 years ago, someone drove through here. And now they think they know what it was like here, right? But like I said, everything that has changed has happened in those last 25 years, right? So prior to that, it was a blue collar town, and it was a, mining, forestry, shipping, rough blue collar industries, right? Like it was totally built on that, and that reputation was real and right and totally fair. But it's a totally different world here now, right? So the difficulty comes in trying to convince those people who maybe were here once before. The great things about my job is being able to do it. So once I get you here, you love it. So if I can get you to come here now, you will fall in love. Period.
I did.
So and that's the case for everyone.
Yeah.
And so I have full confidence in that. And so the challenge comes in trying to get those people to come. But once I get them, they're sold. That the sale's easy, right? But the getting here. So overcoming that reputation. Outside of Ontario and Canada, that reputation doesn't exist. So there, I just got to show people pretty pictures and they want to come. Like, oh yeah, of course. You show people from Europe or whatever, they definitely want to come. They're in.
Right.
And so that's an easy sale to make. So it's the people who have that preconceived notion or have read some story or maybe knew someone that went to university here in the 80s or whatever. Everyone's got a story, right? Everyone has been here once. Everyone knows someone who came from here. Everyone's got some connection. And and so I got to overcome sometimes reputations from 25 years ago. And it's difficult to do in a conversation, but it's really not. Like, I've just got to show you the difference. Like, you're right. It used to be like that, but now it's not. And here's why, right? And so once you can get people here, they love it.
Obviously you're local, the area super well, the region well. You're not passionate at all, by the way. What should people know about Thunder Bay that they can't read up on the internet, read up in a blog post, find in guidebooks? What's that quintessential Thunder Bay that you can feel it, but you can't really explain it?
Yeah, it's the vibe. So Thunder Bay is just a little bit slower than everywhere else, and in a good way, like chill. Like everyone is just, we all just took a breath before we did whatever we did, right? So you never really hear a car horn in traffic. You don't really hear, no one gets too angry if they gotta wait in line. It's just people are a little more relaxed, right? And that I believe at least is directly related to that connection to the environment. We are surrounded by the calmness of nature no matter where we are, right? Like, we are in the heart of downtown. I could touch Lake Superior. There's trees all around me, wildlife walking through the park, right? So like that, it's not like being in downtown Toronto where there's the stress of the city. It's just a chill place to be, and the residents are like that too, and visitors can't help but absorb that when they get here. So like, the city doesn't move fast. So if you want to come here and speed to your destination, it doesn't do that. So it just sort of forces you to take a breath and relax.
It's almost like a culture shock because you're expecting horns and pushing. But anyway, I totally hear you. And when I landed, within the hour, I was at Kakabeka, I was sampling cheese, and I was having a pint within the hour. And I saw maybe 15 cars on the road.
Yeah.
It was great. It was like, well, I'm actually underwhelmed by the amount of traffic, but overwhelmed with the amount of things that I'm tasting, seeing, and feeling, right? Mm-hmm. Rapid fire, 10 questions with Stephanie Reid, all right?
Okay. Yeah.
Alone on a kayak on Lake Superior or with friends in a cabin in the woods?
Can I go with alone in a cabin in the woods?
Do you have my friends? No.
I love my friends. I would take a cabin in the woods. Although a kayak in Lake Superior is fantastic, Lake Superior can be unpredictable, and I wouldn't want to be alone out there in a kayak.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. If you had to pick Finnish pancakes or a Persian,
Finnish pancakes, although Persians are fantastic.
right?
So
Complete
that's
this.
a hard choice, but Finnish pancakes.
I ask loaded questions for a reason. Complete the sentence, Stephanie. I never travel without my
uh, uh, Earbuds, music,
music. On a
yeah,
plane, aisle seat or window?
a window all day.
What's on your road trip playlist?
A lot of like 90s and early 2000s rap music.
Okay. So no Milli Vanilli from 1990.
Well, some of that sometimes too. I have a pretty varied playlist, but I find summertime leads to like sunroof open rap music
Right.
radio time.
Who would you love to have a meal with, dead or alive?
Oh, I don't know.
Tough.
That's a tough question. Let me come back to that one.
Dead or alive, who would you want sitting next to you on a flight?
Oh, my dog.
Your dog? Nice.
He's sitting right next to me right now. He's been sleeping here this whole time.
Oh, amazing. When I say the word travel, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Fun.
Fun. What's one piece of advice or a suggestion for first-time visitors to Thunder Bay?
Have an open mind. Be ready to come. But you'll like it. Open mind for sure though.
Where do you find your zen?
Just outside. So like Lake Superior for sure. I like being near water of any kind. I like stand-up paddleboarding and things like that. Water is my thing.
So what about that meal?
Well, I don't know. I'd kind of like to have dinner with you, Jim.
Oh, come on. Surely you could find someone more interesting.
No, that's it.
I appreciate that. I'm flattered. Thank you. Stephanie Reid, Digital and Travel Media Officer for Tourism Thunder Bay. Thank you so much for taking the time and sitting down with me and talking everything Thunder Bay. I look forward personally to coming back up when the time is right and exploring more of your city. I love it, and anything that we can do to promote your amazing neck of the woods in this country is always a pleasure. So thank you. I'm honored to have had you today on the Fact Up podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jim. Always good to talk to you. And if anyone wants any more information about Thunder Bay, they can contact me directly or just go to our website, visit thunderbay.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Stay safe. And I hope all of, your family and friends are also keeping well as well.
Awesome. Thanks, you too.